Hola, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenido o bienvenida a este video. Hello and welcome to today's lesson. So, direct and indirect object pronouns in Spanish, they can be pretty tricky, but once you get these down, you will be impressing people with your Spanish skills. So, let's take a look. First, we're going to take a look at the direct object pronouns. So, why do we use pronouns in Spanish? It's simply to shorten up our sentences. So I don't want to have to constantly say refrigerador. That's a really hard word, refrigerador. I can just turn it into lo, which would be its object pronoun. Now, this is really, really, really important, okay? If you're gonna remember one thing from this video, let it be this, okay? 9 out of 10 times we use direct object pronouns for things, and almost always we use indirect object pronouns for people. So anytime you hear something like lo or la or los or las, it's almost always going to be referring to an object. Now, it's not always the case, but it's almost always the case. Next, and when you see something like le or les, it's pretty much always referring to a person, okay? That is a just easy rule of thumb to remember. So anytime you hear something like le or les, it's for a person. Anytime you hear something like lo, la, los, las, it's for an object, okay? So here are direct object pronouns. Me, te, lo, la, nos, los, and las. We're not going to go over vosotros. I don't teach that because we only use it in Spain. Okay, so this is what we call the third person singular. So this could be something for like the ball, la pelota. So we can just cut off pelota and just have la, meaning it. Okay, or las pelotas. Okay, now it would just be las, them. Okay, these are super, super important. Okay, now remember how I said that 9 out of 10 times we'll use these for objects? Well, here is the 1 out of 10 times that you will not use the direct object pronoun for an object. Instead, we'll be using for a person. Okay, so llamaron a mi mamá. Now, the reason that we're using the direct object pronoun here is because there's only one object in the sentence. So it is directly receiving the action of this verb, llamaron, okay? So direct objects are objects in sentences that directly receive the action of the verb, okay? So notice how here it's coming right after this verb, llamaron, okay? The indirect objects of sentences are indirectly affected by the verbs of the sentences, okay? So in this case, if I don't want to have to keep saying mamá, I can just say la llamaron, they called her. Now be careful with the placement of our object pronouns. The general rule of thumb is that object pronouns always go before the first conjugated verb in a sentence. So here is our conjugated verb llamaron, coming from the infinitive verb llamar, meaning to call. So we have they called. Now we're going to put our object pronoun before, and it'll be la llamaron. Okay, they called her, instead of saying they called my mom. Okay, Juan tiró la pelota. Juan threw the ball. La pelota is our direct object because it is directly receiving the action of the verb tiró. Okay, Juan tiró la pelota. Now we have Juan la tiró. We can just cut it off, and now we have he threw it. Okay. Now, I underlined Juan here because if we have prior context, I don't need to add the Juan if I don't want to. So if we were already talking about Juan, I don't need to keep saying Juan la tiró, Juan la tiró. I can just say la tiró, okay? He threw it. And because I have prior context, I can do that. I don't have to add Juan because you and I understand who we were talking about in the first place, okay? Los niños leen el libro. Los niños leen el libro. Once again, here's our verb, leen, and it is directly affecting this object, el libro. Therefore, it is the direct object. So, in order to turn it into its direct object pronoun, according to our rule, it's masculine and it's the third person singular, so it'll be lo. Remember our rule, right? We have to put the object pronoun before the conjugated verb. So therefore, we have lo leen, okay? They read it. Or you can also say los niños lo leen. But just like I said here, right, we don't need to add them if we already have the prior context. So I can just say lo leen. They read it. Okay, does that make sense? Well, let's move on. I also have a more in-depth lesson in my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy. If you go to my website, SpanishLate.com, you can check it out. I also have a free course on there. Okay, now let's take a look at our indirect object pronouns. Okay, so we have someone like Ana, she is a person, we can turn her into le. Okay, we're going to take a look at these. So we have me, te, le, nos, and les. These are our indirect object pronouns. Now notice how le can refer to él, can refer to ella, can also refer to usted. Just like les can refer to ellas, ellos, and ustedes. Okay? Les and le. Okay, so we have no genders there. All right? That's why extra context is very important when we're using the indirect object pronouns. For example, Miguel le compró una rosa a Ana. Okay? Notice how I put a Ana. So Miguel bought a rose for Ana, or in this case, for her. Now, why would we put the le here if we have this extra context? Wouldn't I just say, Miguel compró una rosa a Ana? Well, this is what we call the redundant le. The reason we put the le in there is because we would always say it like this, but we wouldn't necessarily always say it like this, where we add on the extra context. This is optional. So I can cut off Ana and I can just say, Miguel le compró una rosa. However, if I don't have prior context and I say this, I won't know who we're talking about. That's why we'll add on this a Ana to give that extra context, okay? However, if we were already talking about Ana and you were to say Miguel le compró una rosa, I would understand most likely that we're talking about Ana, okay? So in this case, Ana is being represented by le, okay? Like I said, 99% of the time when you see le or les, it's referring to a person. 9 out of 10 times when you see lo or la, los or las, it's going to be referring to an object, okay? So I highlighted rosa in blue because this is our direct object of the sentence, whereas Ana is the indirect object, okay? So we can actually turn both of these into object pronouns. Now we have Miguel se la compró. Hold on though, what the heck is going on? Why are we saying se? Ugh, I hate the word se, it's so confusing. I don't blame you. Okay, so now, typically, this would be Miguel le la compró, right? Le la compró. He bought it for her. However, the Spaniards decided that, you know what? Lilo and Stitch doesn't sound good in Spanish, okay? Le and lo don't sound good together, or les lo, or les los, or le los, whatever. You cannot have the lelo, lela, any of that. You have to change the le or the les into se. Why? It's just the way it is. Okay? Miguel se la compró. He bought it for her. Okay? So I know that gets a little bit tricky, and I wouldn't worry about it too much. I would worry most about turning one or the other into an object pronoun and then practicing that way. Okay? But this is a little bit more advanced. Okay? Now, remember how I said the general rule of thumb is to put the object pronouns before the conjugated verb in a sentence? So like here's our conjugated verb, here's our indirect. Indirect always comes before the direct object pronoun, okay? Well, we can also, in certain cases, attach them onto the end of words, okay? There's 3 different examples here. We have the present progressive, so está comprándome. So he or she is buying me, blah, 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 whatever. So notice how I can put the me onto the end of the present progressive, okay? Now, I can also say, you know what? I like this, but I kind of prefer the other one. So I'll cut this off. I'll bring it over before the first conjugated verb of the sentence. So we have me está comprando, blah, blah, blah. We won't put it twice, okay? It's one or the other. Now, is there any difference? No. They both mean the same thing. It's literally just your preference. Okay? So, está comprándome or me está comprando. Okay? So, remember how we were just playing with the 2 object pronouns together? We can do the same thing here. Let's say we're talking, she is buying me it, and we're talking about the pizza. Okay? That would be feminine and singular. So, according to our rule, that would be la. So, we could say, está comprándome la. Está comprándomela. She is buying me it, or buying it for me. You can also say, me la está comprando. Either or. Next, we have commands. Now, when it comes to commands in Spanish, the rule is that you have to attach on the object pronouns after the command. So, dámelo. Give it to me. Remember, the indirect object goes before the direct object. Dámelo, give it to me. You can also say dame or dime, tell me. Dime or dímelo, tell me it. Okay? You could say me da, and you might have heard that before. However, that's a way that we typically order in Spanish, or it's a way that we command people to do things, but it's really informal. It's an even more passive way to command someone to do something, okay? But just for now, remember that we attach on our object pronouns to commands. Dámelo, okay? And finally, no quiero decirte. I don't want to tell you. What can I do? I can cut this off, and now I can put it before the conjugated verb, which would be no te quiero decir, okay? What if we want to add on something like lo or la? What if I want to say, I don't want to tell you the truth? La verdad. I could say, no quiero decírtela. Or, no te la quiero decir. Okay? I know this is a lot of information. I know this is a very quick lesson on the object pronouns. Like I said, I have a more in-depth lesson on all of this on my website, SpanishLink.com, inside my Fluent Spanish Speaker Academy, but that is the gist, okay? The reason we use these is to shorten up our sentences, and native Spanish speakers use these all the time, so I highly recommend that you practice and study these more. Bueno, muchas gracias por ver este video. It would really mean a lot to me if you were to like this video. It does help me out a lot. Bueno, muchas gracias y que tengas muy buen día. Hasta luego.